and very humid. There's only one season down there, and it's summer. And when I say flat, even the hills were man-made. You could literally see for miles, and if it wasn't for the buildings obstructing your view. Because of the differences between Florida and the Carolinas, 3 things are very special to me: fall colors, snow, and the mountains. So imagine my excitement when I was 14 years old and heard that our Baptist youth group was going to Ridgecrest. Ridgecrest is the Baptist equivalent of Cayuga. I couldn't wait to see mountains again. It was a great trip, but my favorite thing was going to Mount Mitchell. Just thinking about being at the highest spot east of the Mississippi was awesome. And it was probably 15 degrees cooler on Mount Mitchell than at Ridgecrest. We could see for miles and miles because we were up so high. Now, being an introvert, I wandered away from the crowd and found a sunny spot and laid down in the grass to look at the clouds. Then something very strange happened. The clouds began to settle in around me. At first, I thought it was fog, but this was different, numinous and mysterious. The wind would push the clouds away, and then they'd come back, and I would be enfolded in them. It reminded me, for some reason, of God leading Israel in the Exodus by cloud by day and by fire by night. And I suddenly felt like I was in the presence of God, and it literally took my breath away. I felt so close to God and so at peace, like nothing I had ever felt before. It was as if I was being held and loved, and I was transformed. I have no idea how long I was there. Time seemed non-existent, but suddenly I heard my name called, and reality came crushing in. Everybody else was already in the cars ready to go, except me. I wanted to stay, but I knew I had to leave. I've never forgotten that experience. It changed me in some pretty important ways. It was the first time I realized that God wasn't a great judge in the sky waiting to smite me. Instead, in that sacred moment, I felt loved and accepted as I never had before, and I felt at peace with myself and with God. I've tried to recreate that experience throughout the years, but it's never quite the same. It was truly a mountaintop experience for me. Our gospel lesson today is also about a mountaintop experience called the Transfiguration, which means to change in form or visage. Its synonym is metamorphosis, like the caterpillar that enters the cocoon and leaves as a butterfly. Or, like this year's Super Bowl-bound Carolina Panthers, which don't resemble the team of the last few years, but have been transformed. And it is truly a mysterious and wonderful thing. Luke sets up the Transfiguration after Peter's confession that Jesus is the Messiah, and after Jesus tells his disciples for the first time that he must suffer and die. Imagine what it must have been like for the disciples to hear that this man that you've given up so much to follow was going to be suffering and dying. Jesus also said that following him would cost them dearly, and maybe even their life. To say it would be a low point for the disciples would be an understatement. And what about Jesus? We don't know when and if Jesus knew his true identity as God's only begotten Son. Perhaps when Peter said the words out loud, "You are the Messiah, the Christ," it made it even more real to Jesus. And along with it came the realization of exactly what that would mean, his death. Jesus needed reassurance, and God provided it to him through the Transfiguration, just 8 days later. Jesus takes Peter, James, and John up to the mountain to pray. They get very sleepy, but they're able to fight it off, and because they do, they get to witness this incredible thing, the Transfiguration. They see Jesus in all his glory, with a face that shines from being in God's presence, and with clothes whiter than anything on earth. They saw Moses and Elijah on either side of Jesus, also in dazzling white, talking to Jesus about what was to come. If Peter, James, and John had any doubts that Jesus was the real thing, those doubts were long gone. Peter, ever the pragmatist, wants to create booths so they can stay there, but a cloud overshadows them and a voice says, "This is my son, my chosen. Listen to him." When the cloud lifts, Moses and Elijah are gone, and Jesus is by himself. Their only response after such an incredible experience was to keep silent. No words could describe it, and no one would have believed them anyway. It changed them forever and was a seminal event from which they could draw courage and strength in the years to come. It was truly a gift from God. Now talk about a halftime pep talk for Jesus. He will leave this mountain and head toward Jerusalem to his eventual death. To have the paragons of faith, Moses and Elijah, appear beside him would have been amazing. Then to hear God's voice telling his followers that he was God's chosen and to listen to him would surely have alleviated any doubts, fears, or anxiety about his mission and eventual suffering and death. God gave Jesus and the three exactly what they needed to face their future. And that is the point. The Transfiguration served to propel Jesus forward. In fact, Jesus comes down from the mount and is confronted with reality, the needs of the people. A great crowd meets him on the way, and a man calls to Jesus about his only son who has convulsions. Those who didn't go up the mountain with Jesus had tried to heal the boy, but couldn't. Jesus, frustrated, chides them, and then he heals the boy. The crowds were astounded at the greatness of God. We read the Transfiguration story during Epiphany because it sheds light on the person and mission of Jesus. It lets us know that Jesus is the real thing, who speaks for God and with whom God is pleased. God provided Jesus and the three with exactly what they needed to face the trials ahead of them. So the Transfiguration not only shows us another important side of Jesus, but it also reminds us that God goes with us into our futures. God will give us whatever we need to be able to face whatever it is we have to face. The Transfiguration story is also important for another reason. It's not to be an end in and of itself. We're not to try and make these special God moments permanent. Instead, like Jesus, we're to learn from them. We're to learn that God is with us. We're to be emboldened and empowered and to willingly leave the mountaintop to go down and meet the needs in the valley below. We are to be with the disfigured, help refigure them so that they are transfigured into something stronger and made whole by the love of God. The purpose of our mountaintop experiences is to change us and give us what we need to go forward into the world and be change agents for God. 42 years ago, yes, that makes me 57, I had such an experience, and it changed me and my understanding of God and my relationship to God. It reaffirmed my desire to follow God wherever he led. And it took a shame-based, awkward teenager and helped her experience the unconditional love of God. It was a means to an end, not an end in and of itself. My experience on Mount Mitchell prepared me to come off the mountain and meet the needs of the people who are in crisis today as a hospital chaplain and deacon. And God does the same for each of you because God loves you and needs you. After all, God has no hands but ours, no feet but ours. We are all called to be God's agents of change here on earth. Willingly, we are to go down the mountain like Jesus did to where God needs us to spread his love and bring healing to those that are in need. Amen.